Admiral Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal bars of her prison cell. Through the small window, she could see the massive viewing screens that covered the walls of the Zephyrian ship's main hangar. Her heart pounded as she watched thousands of human prisoners being lined up in neat rows on the planet's surface below. The Third Fleet had fought bravely for 3 months at Kepler 442. They had held the system against impossible odds, buying time for civilian evacuations from the outer colonies. But in the end, the Zephyrian Empire's numbers had been too great. Admiral Chen had made the hardest decision of her military career and ordered the surrender to save her people's lives. Now she wished she had fought to the last ship. Emperor Valdris stood on a golden platform, his forearms raised toward the cameras that would broadcast this moment across the entire galaxy. His purple skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and his 6 eyes looked down at the human prisoners with cold satisfaction. Behind him, thousands of Zephyrian soldiers stood at attention, their weapons ready. "Citizens of the galaxy," the Emperor's voice boomed through speakers throughout the ship. "Today you witnessed the price of defying the eternal Zephyrian Empire. These humans dared to resist our rightful expansion. They chose war over peaceful submission. Now they will serve as an example to all species who might consider such foolishness." Sarah felt sick. She counted the rows of prisoners on the screens. 7 million human souls stood on that barren planet. Soldiers who had fought beside her. Medics who had saved countless lives. Engineers who had kept their ships running against all odds. Even civilians who had simply been in the wrong place when the Empire attacked. A young Zephyrian guard noticed her watching and laughed. "Your people will make excellent fertilizer for our new colony worlds," he said in broken human language. "The Empire has been very generous. Usually we kill prisoners immediately, but Emperor Valdris wanted the galaxy to see what happens to those who resist us." Sarah said nothing. She had been trained to resist interrogation, to maintain dignity even in capture. But watching 7 million of her people about to die was breaking something inside her that she didn't know could break. The Emperor continued his speech. "For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire has brought order to chaos. We have united countless species under our banner. Some joined willingly. Others required encouragement. But all eventually understood that resistance is futile." He gestured toward the human prisoners. "Humans are a young species. They have existed for mere thousands of years while we have ruled for millennia, yet they believe they can stand against us. Today we correct this misunderstanding." The camera zoomed in on individual faces in the crowd. Sarah recognized many of them. Commander Torres, who had saved her ship during the Battle of Proxima. Dr. Kim, who had worked 36-hour shifts treating wounded soldiers. Lieutenant Morrison, barely 20 years old, who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions. All of them stood with their backs straight and their heads high. Even facing death, they refused to show fear to their captors. The human species has proven itself to be a plague upon galactic civilization, Emperor Valdris declared. They spread rapidly. They resist all attempts at proper governance. They infect other species with their rebellious ideas. Like any plague, they must be eliminated before they can spread further. Sarah's hands gripped the bars so tightly her knuckles turned white. The word plague echoed in her mind. This wasn't just execution. This was the Empire declaring genocide against her entire species. The Emperor raised one of his forearms, and thousands of Zephyrian weapons powered up with an ominous hum. The sound carried through the ship's speakers, making every human prisoner on board the ship flinch. "Let this moment be remembered throughout the galaxy," the Emperor said. "This is what happens to those who defy the Zephyrian Empire. This is the fate that awaits any species that chooses resistance over submission." Sarah closed her eyes, but she couldn't close her ears. The sound that followed would haunt her for the rest of her life. 7 million energy weapons firing at once created a thunderclap that shook the very ground. When she opened her eyes, the screen showed only empty uniforms scattered across the planetary surface. 7 million humans, gone in an instant. The Zephyrian soldiers on the ship cheered. Their prisoner guards laughed and celebrated as if they had just witnessed a great victory instead of mass murder. The Emperor smiled with all 6 eyes, clearly pleased with his demonstration of power. But Sarah noticed something the celebrating Zephyrians missed. In the human prison sections of the ship, there was no crying, no screaming, no begging for mercy. The surviving human prisoners stood in complete silence, their faces showing no emotion at all. Sarah recognized that look. She had seen it before in the eyes of soldiers who had lost everything but refused to break. It was the look of people who had moved beyond fear and pain into something much more dangerous. One of the other human prisoners, Captain Martinez from the destroyer Defiance, caught her eye through the bars of his cell across the corridor. He mouthed a single word. "Remember." Sarah nodded. She would remember. They all would remember. The Emperor's broadcast continued for another hour as he spoke about the Empire's strength and the futility of resistance. He showed footage of human colonies surrendering, of Earth's government offering peace negotiations, of the scattered human fleets retreating to defensive positions. Soon, he declared, the human problem will be solved permanently. Their homeworld will be occupied. Their colonies will be resettled by proper galactic citizens, and their name will be forgotten. Just another footnote in the Empire's glorious history. When the broadcast finally ended, the Zephyrian guards returned to their duties with smug satisfaction. They had just witnessed their Empire's greatest triumph. The execution of 7 million prisoners would surely break human resistance once and for all. But Sarah knew better. She had studied human history. She knew what her species was capable of when pushed beyond all limits. The Zephyrians thought they had just ended a war. Instead, they had started something much worse. As night cycle began on the ship, Sarah lay on her hard prison bunk and stared at the ceiling. In the darkness, she could hear other human prisoners whispering through the ventilation systems. Not plans of escape or rescue. Something else entirely. They were sharing names. The names of the 7 million who had died. Making sure each one would be remembered. Making sure each death would be counted. Sarah whispered her own list into the darkness. Commander Torres, Dr. Kim, Lieutenant Morrison, Sergeant Johnson, Specialist Chen. The list went on and on, each name burning itself into her memory. The Zephyrian Empire had made a mistake today. They thought that killing 7 million humans would terrify the rest into submission. They thought that broadcasting the execution across the galaxy would demonstrate their unbreakable power. Instead, they had just taught humanity exactly what kind of enemy they were facing. They had shown every human in the galaxy that the Zephyrians would never stop until every last human was dead. That there could be no peace, no negotiation, no compromise. The Empire had declared genocide, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that humanity would accept those terms. The war was about to begin in earnest. And it would not end until one species or the other was completely extinct. 3 weeks after the massacre, Admiral Kextar of the Zephyrian 3rd Combat Fleet stared at his tactical display with growing confusion. The human colonies should have surrendered by now. The execution of 7 million prisoners had been broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. Every species had seen the Empire's power demonstrated in the most brutal way possible. Yet the humans remained silent. Any response from the Earth government? He asked his communications officer. Nothing, sir. No diplomatic messages, no surrender offers, no pleas for mercy. Complete communication blackout from all human territories. Admiral Kextar frowned. In his 200 years of military service, he had never seen a defeated species react this way. Usually, after such a demonstration, the surviving leadership would immediately offer unconditional surrender. They would beg for their people's lives and promise eternal loyalty to the Empire. The humans had done none of this. What about our intelligence networks? Surely our spies in human space have reports. The intelligence officer's skin turned a nervous shade of green. Sir, we've lost contact with most of our assets. The few who still report say something very strange is happening. Human colonies are emptying. Emptying? You mean they're evacuating? No, sir. That's the strange part. Our long-range sensors show no evacuation fleets. No massive refugee movements. No ships leaving human space. The colonies are just becoming empty. The humans are disappearing, but we don't know where they're going. Admiral Kextar felt an uncomfortable twinge in his stomach. He had conquered dozens of species for the Empire, but none had ever simply vanished before. On Earth, deep beneath the surface in a facility that officially didn't exist, Director James Harrison stood before the largest tactical display in human history. The screen showed the positions of every human ship, every colony, every outpost in known space. Red indicators marked locations that had already completed their phase of the operation. Yellow showed those currently in progress. Green indicated areas still waiting for activation. Status report, Harrison said to his staff. Phase 7 completed 20 minutes ago, reported his aide. The Centauri colonies are now dark. All 15 billion residents successfully relocated to the deep space installations. Harrison nodded. And the Kepler sector? Phase 8 begins in 6 hours. Another 2 billion people to move. The director studied the display. 50 years of secret preparation were finally paying off. When humanity had first encountered the Zephyrian Empire, some visionaries had recognized the threat. They had seen how the Empire treated other species. They had understood that peaceful coexistence would never be possible, and so they had prepared for the unthinkable. The Ghost Protocol had been developed in absolute secrecy. Hidden bases built in asteroid fields where no one would look. Massive facilities constructed in dark space between star systems. Entire artificial worlds created inside hollow moons and dead planets. All connected by a network of stealth ships that could move populations without being detected. For 50 years, humanity had quietly prepared for the day they might need to vanish from the galaxy entirely. That day had come. Sir, the aide continued, we're receiving reports from our escape teams. Admiral Chen's group successfully broke free from the prison ship. She's requesting permission to begin recruitment for the Special Operations Division. Harrison smiled grimly. Tell the Admiral that recruitment is authorized. She knows what kind of people we need. 2 days later, on the abandoned mining station where Admiral Chen had been brought after her escape, she stood before a group of 50 humans. They were all volunteers from the prison ships and destroyed colonies. People who had lost everything in the Empire's attacks. I'm not going to lie to you, Chen said. What I'm asking you to do isn't military service. It isn't even war as we understand it. The Empire has declared genocide against our species. They want to exterminate every human in the galaxy. She paused and looked at each face in the crowd. They were the survivors. The ones who had watched their friends die. The ones who had seen their homes destroyed. The ones who had nothing left to lose. I'm asking you to help me return the favor. Captain Martinez, who had escaped with her, stepped forward. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? The Empire thinks they understand war, Chen replied. They think war is about conquering territory and forcing submission. They fight like civilized beings with rules and honor and limits. She activated a holographic display showing Zephyrian fleet positions. We're going to teach them what war really means. We're going to show them what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. We're going to hunt them across the galaxy until there's nothing left of their precious empire but dust and memory. A young lieutenant raised her hand. Ma'am, how can 50 people fight an empire of trillions? Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Because we're not going to fight fair. We're not going to follow rules. We're not going to show mercy. We're going to become everything they fear in their worst nightmares. She gestured to the display. While our people hide in the deep, dark places, we're going to become ghosts. We're going to strike from nowhere and vanish before they can respond. We're going to make them afraid to leave their home systems. We're going to turn their own empire against them. Over the next several weeks, as the last human colonies completed their evacuation to hidden bases, small groups of volunteers began gathering at secret locations throughout the galaxy. They came from every branch of human military service. Marines who specialized in boarding actions, Navy pilots who knew every trick of space combat, engineers who could turn anything into a weapon. They were given new ships built in hidden shipyards using stolen Zephyrian technology, vessels that could appear and disappear like phantoms, weapons that could slice through Empire shields like paper, equipment that would let them infiltrate the most secure Zephyrian installations. But most importantly, they were given a new purpose. They were no longer soldiers fighting for territory or resources. They were the instruments of species vengeance. They were the answer to genocide. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her new ship, a stealth destroyer that had no name because it officially didn't exist. Around her, the crew prepared for their first mission. These weren't the same people who had fought at Kepler 442. The massacre had changed them. It had stripped away everything soft and civilized and left only the predator core that lurked in every human heart. Communications, she ordered. Broadcast on all frequencies. Full galactic transmission. Channel open, Admiral. Chen looked into the camera that would carry her words across the galaxy. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold as the space between stars. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Terran Forces. 7 days ago, the Zephyrian Empire executed 7 million human prisoners of war. They broadcast this act across the galaxy as a demonstration of their power and a warning to others who might resist their expansion. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Empire has declared genocide against humanity. We accept the terms of this war. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy. The Zephyrian Empire chose to make this a war of extinction. We will accommodate them. She gestured to coordinates that appeared on the screen behind her. To all Zephyrian forces, you have 72 hours to evacuate the Rigel system. After that time, any Empire presence in that sector will be considered a legitimate target for total destruction. You wanted to see what humanity becomes when you threaten our existence. You're about to find out. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, in hidden bases and secret facilities, millions of humans watched their admiral's declaration. They understood what it meant. The time for hiding was almost over. Soon they would emerge from the darkness to reclaim their place in the galaxy. But first, the Empire needed to learn a lesson about what happened when you tried to exterminate humanity. The lesson would be written in fire and blood across the stars. Captain Marcus Torres crouched in the maintenance shaft of the Zephyrian supply ship Prosperity. His team of 12 moved like shadows through the vessel's corridors, their new stealth suits making them invisible to the ship's sensors. 6 months of hunting had taught them exactly how to move through enemy ships without being detected. The Prosperity was carrying medical supplies to a Zephyrian colony world. Under the old rules of war, it would have been considered a non-combatant vessel. But there were no old rules anymore. The Empire had declared genocide and humanity had accepted. Target the reactor core, Torres whispered into his comm. Remember, we need 3 survivors for questioning. The rest are fair game. His team acknowledged with hand signals. They had done this 47 times before. They moved with the precision of predators who had perfected their hunting technique through constant practice. The Zephyrian crew never knew what hit them. 20 minutes later, Torres stood in the ship's communications center with the 3 surviving crew members bound at his feet. One of them, the ship's captain, stared up at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. "You're supposed to be extinct," the Zephyrian gasped. The Emperor said your species was defeated. "Your colonies are empty. Your fleets are scattered," Torres smiled coldly. "That's what we wanted you to think." He activated the ship's communication system and began transmitting on all emergency frequencies. "This is Captain Marcus Torres of the Human Revenant Fleet. The Zephyrian supply vessel Prosperity has been captured. All crew are dead except for 3 survivors who will be returned to the Empire with a message." Torres looked down at the terrified prisoners. "Tell your superiors that humanity remembers. Tell them we remember every face of the 7 million. Tell them that we are coming for each and every one of you." He set the ship's self-destruct timer for 10 minutes and herded the survivors into an escape pod. As the Revenant's shadow moved away into the darkness of space, Torres watched the supply ship explode in a brilliant flash of light. 48 ships destroyed, thousands of Zephyrian soldiers dead, and the Empire still had no idea where the attacks were coming from. Admiral Kextar stood in the command center of the Zephyrian stronghold on Vega Prime, studying reports that made no sense. In the 6 months since the human colonies had gone dark, his forces had lost over 200 ships. Not in major battles, not in heroic last stands. They simply disappeared. "Show me the tactical display," he ordered. The holographic projector activated, showing the locations of every ship loss. Red dots scattered across multiple star systems with no apparent pattern. Some were military vessels. Others were supply ships or transports. The attack seemed random, but Kextar knew better. There was a pattern here. He just couldn't see it yet. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we've analyzed the survivor testimonies from the escape pods. They all describe the same thing. Human ships that appear from nowhere, attack with devastating precision, and vanish before reinforcements can arrive." "How many humans are we talking about?" "Unknown, sir. Our estimates range from a few hundred to several thousand. They're operating in small groups, never more than 1 or 2 ships at a time." Kextar felt his throat tighten. A few thousand humans were paralyzing fleet movements across half the Empire. It should have been impossible. His forces outnumbered the human raiders by millions to 1. Yet somehow, the humans were winning. On the bridge of the stealth destroyer Vengeance, Admiral Chen reviewed the latest reports from her hunting packs. 67 teams were now operating across Empire space. Each one consisted of volunteers who had lost family or friends in the massacre. Each one was driven by a cold fury that made them impossibly dangerous. "Status report," she requested. "Pack 7 destroyed a Zephyrian munitions depot at Altair," her tactical officer reported. "Pack 12 captured a troop transport near Vega. Pack 19 eliminated a patrol squadron in the Centauri approach." Chen nodded. The raids were having their intended effect. Zephyrian ships were now traveling in heavily armed convoys. They were pulling forces back from the front lines to protect their supply routes. They were starting to look over their shoulders every time they jumped to a new system. "Any word from our intelligence assets?"
"Yes, ma'am."
"Our people inside the Empire report increasing paranoia among military commanders. Some are requesting reassignment to safer sectors. Others are demanding additional escort vessels for routine patrols." Chen smiled grimly. Fear was spreading through the Zephyrian military like a virus. They were learning what it felt like to be hunted. "Ma'am," the communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from Pack 15. They've encountered something unusual." The main screen activated, showing Captain Rodriguez aboard the stealth frigate Ghost. Behind him, Chen could see several alien beings that were definitely not Zephyrian. "Admiral," Rodriguez reported, "we intercepted a slave transport near the Kepler system. The cargo holds were full of Karathi prisoners. They're asking to speak with you." Chen raised an eyebrow. The Karathi were one of the oldest enslaved species in the Empire. They had been under Zephyrian rule for over 5 centuries. "Put them through." A tall insectoid being appeared on the screen. Its compound eyes gleamed with an emotion Chen recognized immediately. "Hope." "Human Admiral," the Karathi said in accented but clear standard. "I am Hive Speaker Zedek Thal. For 500 years my people have served as slaves to the Empire. We have built their ships, mined their worlds, died in their factories. We thought our bondage would never end." The alien paused, its mandibles clicking nervously. "But now we see humans fighting back. We see the Empire's ships burning. We see their soldiers afraid. For the first time in centuries, we dare to hope for freedom." Chen studied the alien carefully. "What are you asking of us, Hive Speaker?" "Teach us to fight as you fight. Help us strike back at our oppressors. We may not be warriors like humans, but we know the Empire's weaknesses. We know where they are vulnerable." Chen looked at her tactical display, showing the positions of dozens of enslaved species throughout Empire space. Billions of beings who had suffered under Zephyrian rule for generations. If they could be convinced to rise up, "Communications, open a channel to all pack leaders," she ordered. "New mission parameters are being transmitted. We're no longer just hunting the Empire. We're liberating its slaves." Over the next several weeks, human raiding parties began targeting slave transports and labor camps throughout Empire space. Each liberation operation was coordinated with freed slave populations, who provided intelligence about Imperial installations and weaknesses. The Karathi proved especially valuable allies. Their knowledge of Imperial ship design allowed human raiders to identify critical vulnerabilities. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves in suicide attacks made them terrifying opponents for Zephyrian security forces. Other species quickly joined the rebellion. The crystalline Vexhi, thought extinct for decades, emerged from hidden colonies to attack Imperial mining operations. The aquatic Merzdai began sabotaging underwater facilities on ocean worlds. Even peaceful species like the Zentari started providing intelligence and safe harbors for human raiders. Admiral Kextar received the reports with growing horror. The human raids had triggered something the Empire had never faced before: a coordinated rebellion by multiple enslaved species. Centuries of careful control were collapsing as world after world erupted in violence. "How many systems are in open revolt?" he asked his staff. 47 confirmed, sir. Another dozen showing signs of unrest. The humans seem to be coordinating the rebellions, but each species is fighting in its own way. Kextar studied the tactical display. Red indicators showed rebel activity spreading like a plague across Imperial space. But the most disturbing sight was the empty zones where human colonies had once been. Those areas remained completely dark, as if humanity had vanished from the galaxy entirely. "What about the human home system? Any activity around Earth?" "Nothing, sir. Long-range sensors show the planet is still there, but we're detecting no orbital installations, no defensive fleets, no communications traffic. It's as if the entire system is abandoned." Kextar knew better. The humans were out there somewhere, planning something. The raids and rebellions were just the beginning. He could feel it in his bones. Captain Torres stood on an observation deck of the hidden base at Omega Station, looking out at the fleet that humanity had assembled in secret. Hundreds of ships filled the artificial cavern, each one built using stolen Zephyrian technology and human innovation. They were sleek, deadly, and completely invisible to Imperial sensors. Around him, thousands of humans prepared for the next phase of their war. No longer just raiders and guerrillas. They were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, a species united by the simple goal of wiping their enemies from existence. The Empire had declared genocide against humanity. Now humanity was going to show them what genocide really looked like. The Karathi homeworld of Ixtara had been a slave planet for 500 years. Its vast underground tunnel networks housed billions of insectoid workers who mined rare metals for the Zephyrian Empire. The planet's surface was covered with Imperial control stations that monitored every tunnel, every work shift, every breath the Karathi took until the humans came. Hive speaker, Zexthal watched from the depths of the ancient hive as human stealth ships materialized above the control stations like ghosts appearing from nowhere. The orbital bombardment lasted exactly 47 seconds. When the light faded, 5 centuries of Imperial control had been reduced to smoking craters. "It is done," Zixthal announced to the assembled hive speakers. "The chains are broken. Our children will know freedom." Across the tunnel networks, 12 billion Karathi emerged from their workstations. They had waited 500 years for this moment. They would not waste it. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the tactical display as liberation fleets spread across the galaxy. What had started as a simple revenge mission had become something much larger. The Empire's enslaved species were rising up everywhere, and humanity was providing the coordination and firepower they needed to succeed. Status report from Ixtara, her communications officer announced. The Karathi have completely overwhelmed Imperial ground forces. They're requesting permission to begin the second phase. Chen nodded. The second phase was something the old civilized humanity would never have approved. But the old humanity had died with 7 million prisoners on a distant planet. What remained was something harder, colder, and infinitely more practical. Permission granted. Tell them to leave no survivors. The Karathi didn't need to be told twice. 500 years of slavery had taught them exactly what mercy they could expect from their imperial masters. They gave back precisely what they had received. None at all. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Kextar stood in the ruins of his command center on Vega Prime. The base had been attacked 3 hours ago by what appeared to be a single human ship. But that single ship had somehow penetrated defenses that should have stopped an entire fleet. How? He demanded of his surviving staff. How did one ship destroy half the base? "Sir," his tactical officer replied nervously, "the attack patterns don't match anything in our databases. The human ship seemed to anticipate our defensive responses. It knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage." Kextar studied the wreckage around him. The humans had targeted the command center's structural supports with surgical precision. They had disabled the shield generators first, then systematically destroyed every critical system. It was the work of someone who understood Imperial base design better than the Zephyrians themselves. "Sir," a communications technician rushed toward him with a data pad. "We're receiving reports from across the sector. The humans aren't just attacking randomly anymore. They're conducting coordinated strikes against specific targets." Kextar took the pad and studied the information. His blood turned cold as he recognized the pattern. The humans were targeting communication relays, supply depots, and command centers. They were systematically dismantling the Empire's ability to coordinate its forces. "Get me a direct channel to Imperial Command," he ordered. "Emperor Valdris needs to know what's happening out here." But when the communication technician tried to establish contact, all he found was static. The communication network that had held the Empire together for 3 millennia was falling apart. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, Director Harrison watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The Ghost Protocol had been more successful than even its creators had imagined. 15 billion humans had vanished from the galaxy without the Empire realizing how they had done it. Now those hidden billions were emerging from their secret bases to reclaim what had been taken from them. "Phase 4 is complete," his aide reported. "All Imperial communication networks in the outer sectors have been destroyed. Phase 5 begins in 6 hours, Harrison nodded. Phase 5 would be different from everything that had come before. The raids and guerrilla attacks had been preparation. The slave rebellions had been distraction. Phase 5 would be the real war. What's the status of our special infiltration teams? All teams have reached their target positions. They're awaiting final authorization. Harrison looked at the display showing the Empire's core worlds, 27 star systems that had never known war, the heart of Zephyrian civilization, protected by centuries of conquest and exploitation. After tomorrow, none of that would matter. Authorization granted. Begin Phase 5. Captain Torres materialized inside the Imperial Museum on Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital world. His infiltration suit made him invisible to both visual and electronic detection, allowing him to walk freely through the halls of Zephyrian culture and history. He wasn't here for military intelligence. Phase 5 had a very different purpose. Torres stopped in front of a massive display showing the Empire's founding documents. 3,000 years of conquest and enslavement reduced to glowing text on a crystal screen. He placed a small device at the base of the display and watched it dissolve into component atoms. The nanobots would spread throughout the museum's network, methodically destroying every piece of digital information. Records, databases, cultural archives, historical documents, all of it would be gone within hours, as if it had never existed. Across the capital city, dozens of other human infiltrators were conducting similar operations. Universities, libraries, government archives, even private collections. The Empire's entire cultural heritage was being systematically erased, but the most important target was the Imperial Palace itself. Admiral. Chen materialized in the throne room just as Emperor Valdris was concluding his daily court session. The four-armed ruler was discussing taxation policies with his advisors, when a human woman simply appeared from nowhere in the center of the room. The Imperial guards reacted instantly, raising their weapons and shouting commands. But Chen moved faster than their sensors could track. In less than 10 seconds, every guard in the room was dead. Emperor Valdris stared at her with all 6 eyes wide in terror. This is impossible. Humans are extinct. We killed them all. Chen smiled coldly. You killed 7 million of us. Do you know how many humans are left in the galaxy, Emperor? Valdris shook his head, unable to speak. 15 billion, Chen replied. We've been hiding in places you never thought to look, preparing for this moment. Did you really think that broadcasting mass murder would intimidate us into submission? The Emperor's purple skin turned pale gray. What do you want? Money, territory? We can negotiate. We want what you wanted, Chen interrupted. Complete extinction of your species. You declared genocide against humanity. We're simply returning the favor. She activated a device on her wrist, and every screen in the throne room came alive with images from across the Empire. Zephyrian worlds burning. Imperial fleets destroyed. Slave species rising up to slaughter their former masters. The systematic destruction of everything the Empire had built over 3 millennia. This is what genocide looks like when humans do it, Chen said quietly. We learned from the best. Emperor Valdris tried to run, but Chen was faster. The weapon she carried had been designed specifically for this moment. It didn't just kill, it erased. When the energy beam struck the Emperor, he simply stopped existing, as if he had never been born. The same scene was playing out across the capital city as human infiltrators eliminated the Empire's entire leadership structure. Government officials, military commanders, cultural leaders, anyone who might try to rebuild what was being destroyed. Admiral Kextar received the news while trying to organize a defense of the outer colonies. The Emperor was dead. The Imperial family was dead. The entire government had been decapitated in a single coordinated strike that had lasted less than an hour. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender offers from Imperial commanders across the galaxy. They're asking for terms. Kextar laughed bitterly. Terms? The humans aren't interested in terms. Look at what they've done to the slave worlds. Look at what they've done to our communication networks. Look at what they've done to our capital. He studied the tactical display one more time. Red indicators showed human forces advancing on multiple fronts. Yellow showed systems in open rebellion. The few remaining green indicators were shrinking by the hour. Sir, what are your orders? Kexter thought about the 7 million human prisoners who had died in that broadcast so many months ago. At the time, it had seemed like a demonstration of imperial power. Now he understood it had been something very different. It had been the Empire's death warrant. All ships, he transmitted on the emergency frequency. This is Admiral Kextar. Effective immediately, all Imperial forces are authorized to surrender to human commanders. Repeat, surrender immediately. Do not resist. Do not fight back. Maybe if we're lucky, they'll show us the mercy we failed to show them. But even as he gave the order, Kextar knew it was probably too late. The humans had learned their lesson about mercy from the Empire itself. And the Empire had taught them that mercy was a luxury that extinct species couldn't afford. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to commit genocide against humanity. 2 years had passed since the broadcast that changed everything. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime, looking out at a city that was slowly rebuilding itself. But the beings walking through those streets were no longer Zephyrians. They were humans, Karathi, Vexai, and dozens of other species who had thrown off the chains of Imperial rule. The Zephyrian Empire was gone. Not defeated, not conquered. Gone. Erased from the galaxy as completely as if it had never existed. Chen walked through the empty corridors of the palace, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls still bore scorch marks from the final battle 2 years ago. She had kept them as a reminder of what happened when someone tried to exterminate humanity. "Admiral," her aide announced, "the Galactic Council is ready for your address." Chen nodded and made her way to the Great Hall where representatives from over 100 species waited. Many of them had been allies during the rebellion. Others had remained neutral. A few had even supported the Empire until the very end. All of them looked at her with the same expression, a mixture of respect, gratitude, and deep, unshakable fear. Chen stepped up to the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. 2 years ago, many of these species had watched 7 million humans die and done nothing. They had accepted it as the natural order of things. The Empire was strong, humanity was weak, and that was how the galaxy worked. Now the Empire was extinct, and humanity controlled more territory than any single species in galactic history. 2 years ago, Chen began, the Zephyrian Empire made a decision. They decided that humanity was a threat to galactic order. They decided that our species should be eliminated. They demonstrated their commitment to this decision by executing 7 million human prisoners of war on live broadcast. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today I stand in the ruins of their capital city, addressing a council that governs the territories they once ruled. The Zephyrian Empire is extinct. Every member of their species is dead. Their culture has been erased. Their history has been forgotten. Their name will be remembered only as a warning to others. A nervous stirring ran through the assembled delegates. The Tritarians, who had been the Empire's closest allies, looked especially uncomfortable. Some of you are wondering if humanity plans to rule the galaxy as the Empire did. Some of you are afraid that we will become the new oppressors, the new masters demanding tribute and submission. Chen smiled, but it was not a reassuring expression. You're thinking about this wrong. We don't want to rule you. We don't want your resources or your territory. We don't want to be your masters. She gestured to the tactical display behind her, showing the current state of the galaxy. We want you to remember what happened here. We want you to understand the lesson that the Empire learned too late. You can fight humanity. You can defeat us in battles. You can occupy our worlds and capture our people. But you can never ever try to wipe us out completely. The display showed the progression of the war. The initial Imperial victories, the human colonies going dark, the guerrilla campaign that followed, the systematic destruction of everything the Empire had built. Because if you try to commit genocide against humanity, we will commit genocide back. And we are very, very good at it. Chen looked directly at the Tritaran delegate, whose species had provided ships for the execution of the 7 million. We learned everything we know about genocide from watching the Empire. We learned how to hunt down every member of a species. We learned how to erase their culture and history. We learned how to make it as if they had never existed at all. The Tritaran delegate's skin turned pale blue with fear. The Empire made one critical mistake, Chen continued. They thought that being stronger meant they could do whatever they wanted to weaker species. They thought that superior technology and greater numbers made them invulnerable. She activated another section of the display, showing the hidden human bases that had been revealed after the war. They didn't understand that humans have a very simple philosophy. If you try to kill all of us, we will try to kill all of you, and we will not stop until one of us is extinct. The hall was completely silent now. Even the Karathi delegates who owed their freedom to humanity looked nervous. The Zephyrian Empire controlled half the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had fleets numbering in the millions. They had technology that we could barely understand. They had populations in the trillions. Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. None of that saved them when they decided to exterminate humanity. None of that mattered when we decided to exterminate them back. She looked out at the assembled delegates one more time. I want to be very clear about something. Humanity does not seek conflict with any of you. We want peace. We want trade. We want cooperation. We want to be part of a galactic community based on mutual respect and shared prosperity. She paused. But if any species, anywhere in this galaxy, ever again attempts to commit genocide against humanity, we will respond with total extinction warfare, not conquest, not subjugation, extinction, complete, absolute, and permanent. The silence stretched for long moments before the Karathi delegate spoke. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the liberated species, we thank humanity for your sacrifice in freeing us from imperial rule. But many of us are concerned about the thoroughness of your response to the Empire's crimes. Chen turned to face the insectoid being. You're asking if we went too far. The Empire committed terrible crimes, yes, but complete extinction of their species. Tell me, Chen interrupted, how many Karathi died in imperial slave camps over the past 500 years? The delegate's mandibles clicked nervously. Billions. Tens of billions. And how many Zephyrians protested those deaths? How many spoke out against the enslavement of your people? Very few. But none, Chen said flatly. 0. In 3,000 years of imperial rule, not a single Zephyrian government official, military officer, or cultural leader ever stood up and said that enslaving other species was wrong. She gestured to the human representatives in the hall. When our government learned about slavery in the Empire, we immediately began planning resistance operations. When we saw how other species were treated, we knew that peaceful coexistence was impossible. We understood that the Empire would never change, never reform, never become anything other than what it was. Chen's expression hardened. The Empire declared total war against humanity. They chose the terms of engagement. We simply played by the rules they established. The Vexhai delegate, a crystalline being that had been thought extinct until the rebellion, spoke in its melodic voice. But surely there could have been another way, some path to justice that didn't require complete extinction. Chen laughed, and the sound was bitter as winter wind. Justice? The Empire executed 7 million prisoners of war on live broadcast. They did it to terrorize the galaxy into submission. They wanted every species to see what happened to those who resisted them. She activated a recording of the original broadcast, showing Emperor Valdris ordering the execution. This is what they considered justice. This is how they solved problems with species they didn't like. They didn't arrest our leaders or occupy our territories or demand reparations. They lined up 7 million people and killed them all while the galaxy watched. The recording ended, leaving the hall in uncomfortable silence. We gave them exactly what they gave us. The only difference is that we were better at it than they were. The meeting continued for several more hours as the delegates worked out the details of the new galactic government. Territories were assigned. Trade agreements were negotiated. Defense pacts were established, but everyone in the room understood the real message that had been delivered. Humanity was now the dominant military power in the galaxy. They had proven they could destroy any enemy completely and permanently, and they had made it very clear what would happen to anyone who tried to commit genocide against them. As the delegates filed out of the hall, Chen remained behind, staring at the empty chamber. Her aide approached quietly. Ma'am, the memorial service for the 7 million is scheduled for tomorrow. Will you be attending? Chen nodded. Of course. They died so that we could learn what our enemies were truly capable of. The least we can do is remember their sacrifice. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Human children played in parks that had once been imperial parade grounds. Karathi artists created sculptures where imperial monuments had stood. Vexhai engineers built new technologies using knowledge freed from imperial archives. The galaxy was healing. The wounds left by 3 millennia of imperial rule were slowly closing. But the scars would remain forever, reminders of what happened when power was exercised without restraint. Chen thought about the 7 million who had died on that distant planet 2 years ago. They had been soldiers, medics, engineers, and support staff. people who had volunteered to defend humanity against imperial expansion. They had died believing that their sacrifice might save others. In the end, they had been right. Their deaths had taught humanity exactly what kind of enemy they faced. Their sacrifice had shown the galaxy what happened when someone tried to exterminate the human species. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to make an example of humanity. They had succeeded beyond their wildest